Ballpark Nation presents. Welcome to Go Astros, your look at the two-time World Series champions from three guys who have been here since Art Howe had hair.
And welcome everybody to another edition of Go Astros. We've got Brian, we've got Andy. The Astros sure did go to Los Angeles and walked away with a rare Astros sweep. A lot of good from the weekend, a lot of meh, but for the most part, a good weekend. Andy, I want to start off with you. First big question is the Justin Verlander started off like we've seen this year and ended almost close to vintage Verlander. Do you feel like that's a function of the Angels not really having a Major League Baseball lineup, or do you think he's figuring things out?
Probably somewhere the story's in both of those things. I wouldn't say it was a vintage Verlander outing because his velocity was down from the last start, from what I've been able to ascertain. I know we exchanged messages on this over the weekend, but he's my Billy Chapel this year. I'm hoping for one more pushing off the sun moment before the end of this season, and I'm hoping it's in the playoffs and not against the Angels this coming weekend, because the Angels aren't a major league team right now. And I think it was necessary from a standpoint of him giving up a couple runs and being able to work out of it, finding the strike zone. But he's not Justin Verlander of 2022. He's not Justin Verlander of 2023 at this point. He's still not getting a lot of swing and miss, still not getting a lot of strikeouts. He is right now, if I have to look at my starters, he's the fourth starter, maybe the fifth starter, depending on how you feel about Spencer Arrighetti. So it was encouraging, but with a whole lot of asterisks attached to it.
Yeah, I do feel like, Brian, maybe what Verlander needs to do is find the Greinke version of himself, where he's not going to throw as hard as he used to. So how does he become a different pitcher? And maybe he is figuring that out because he even talked about pitching more to contact in his post game.
Yeah, I mean, the big issue with Justin Verlander has been his decline in his ability to get swing and miss. And he was, I think he had 9 whiffs, which was a lot better than the 2 he had in the start before against the Diamondbacks. He had some on his breaking pitches. He had none against the Diamondbacks. So that was something I was particularly tracking for, because that's something I've noticed in Verlander. And we got kind of an average for Verlander this season start, or maybe slightly above average, which is 2 runs, lots of reasonable contact. I think a big thing is he didn't give up a home run, which he's vulnerable to in his best days. So I talked about the Diamondback start. It wasn't that he got it's that he got with lots of men on base. He used to give up solo home runs, giving up the grand slam is, well, obviously a bigger problem. He still is. I can't imagine he's going to get a start in the wild card series unless something major looks different. And, the thing about 40-something dudes, which I think we can have good insight on in this podcast, is that it's kind of hard for them to change. Time you're 40, you're pretty set in your ways, and Justin Verlander is very set in his ways as a baseball player.
Well, I'm also gonna watch For the Love of the Game this week. I want to listen to that entire "Push Back the Sun." That whole bit is great. Andy, one of the things I'll undercut my own premise too is he also only gave up 2 runs, but he had 3 5-star outfield plays to assist him, one by each outfielder. I mean, that's one of those things that does kind of mask, because it could have gone south real fast if any one of those balls had fallen.
Yeah, it's really hard to figure out how good or how bad that start was on Saturday, because they're playing the Angels. The Angels don't have a lot of talent to begin with, and they're certainly not trying to win games right now. And I guess the hard part for me is that there's nothing that's going to show in his next start, because guess who that's going to be against?
Yeah.
The Angels. If they give him that third start, which will be against Cleveland, I hope that on some level we have nothing to play for, but I hope at some level we do have a little bit to play for. because he's going to have to take that next step of being able to pitch with whatever he has available to him. I think if there was anything I found encouraging is that he was able to get his breaking ball over for strikes this start. He wasn't the last couple of starts, and that makes his fastball, even if it's not 97, 98 miles an hour anymore, more effective. That was the problem against the Diamondbacks. That was the problem against the Reds, is he couldn't get his breaking ball over at all, and so they could just tee off on the 94-mile-an-hour fastball, which the location on that wasn't great. So it's encouraging, but I don't see how you would give him start number 3 to clinch, to potentially win a wild card series. I just don't think he's there at that point, and I hope that data versus sentiment wins the day when it gets to that point.
Yeah, that's
so. In many ways, I thought the start in Anaheim was a mirror image to his start in Cincinnati. And part of his problem in Cincinnati is all his contact, a bunch of balls fell through. And here, if you look at sort of expected batting average on a lot of those balls, they weren't huge. But expected batting average doesn't take in the what's called the spray angle. They hit the ball in good places. He got some batted ball luck. Again, part of why I'm focusing on swing and miss, velocity, things like that, because those are the more sort of constants. And he's not what he was. But who of us is?
He didn't walk the bases loaded in the first inning, so that was a thing.
He only walked 2 guys, so that was
yeah.
But less than 3. Less than 3.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Offensively, though, the Astros had a couple of really, really good days. Obviously, some of the still runs and scoring position issues are still there, but they were getting hits up and down the lineup. It was nice to see Jason Hayward have a really good day, especially yesterday, because all reports have been he's been an amazing part of the clubhouse already. I think Dana Brown, though, Brian, needs some level of credit for some of the guys he's picked up off the scrap heap into if we're talking baseball movies, to quote Billy Beane in Moneyball, trying to squeeze every last bit of baseball that's left out of them. But I mean, you got to think about between Taylor Scott and even Neris is pitching better for the Astros. And of course, Hayward, he's done a really good job on the fly of keeping this team afloat with everything they've been facing.
Yeah, this team has required more maintenance and more sort of sifting through the options at the bottom of the roster than several recent Astros teams, and they've done pretty well on that. They didn't have internal options for the bullpen they've had confidence in. They went out and have, again, some of it didn't work. Dylan Coleman guys were was real high on in the offseason, and they traded an actual minor leaguer. I mean, not a huge prospect, but something of value for him. That didn't work out. It'd have been nice if they kept Declan Cronin, who's had a nice year for the Marlins. But yeah, Taylor Scott, Hector Neris, again, Caleb Ward is a guy I keep looking at as doing a really doing a surprisingly good job based on his track record. They've gotten Ben Gamble and Jason Hayward added to the back of the bench recently because they've needed more left-handed options in the outfield.
Andy, I want you to comment on that too, but also one of the things I've been really impressed with, and I know a lot of it is a roll of the dice, but I feel like Espada all season has been really good at pressing the pinch hit button. I think he's done a really good job of finding replacing a guy and seeing for the most part, those guys are producing. So I know, again, a lot of that's luck, but it's also just shows you, I think, that he is a good baseball mind and is a good manager, despite what so many of our fan base still want to say.
I think the big key there is that he's actually willing to pinch hit guys because Dusty wasn't. For a large part, Dusty was very, I'm going to stick with my 9, and this is the 9 unless somebody gets hurt. This is who we're rolling out. Espada, and he showed that in the playoffs last year when Dusty got ran, the willingness to put a guy in a situation where he can succeed. And for a large part, that's worked out, but that does take a little bit of managerial courage. It's a lot easier just to, this is my 9 starters, I'm going to roll with these guys the whole game. You don't do that with a bullpen, so finding a manager who's, not willing to do it with batters is a little bit weird, I think, in 2024, but I think Espada does it and has shown a deft hand with it, recognizing opportunities. And some of that is, I know that there is a section of the Astros fan base who is convinced we don't do analytics anymore, but some of that is not just gut feeling by Espada. Some of that is matchups. Some of that is how does this guy handle this type of pitch in this type of situation, and running guys out there that have a chance to succeed. And I think you're seeing that more and more. As far as the pickups and giving Dana Brown credit, it's baling wire and duct tape to some extent because of the injuries you've had over the course of the season to both the starting rotation, in middle of the bullpen, and then definitely with Kyle Tucker being out for as long as he was. You needed to pick up Ben Gamble. Chas McCormick has not performed the majority of this year. I know he had a good 2 weeks before he got hurt. You needed to pick up Jason Hayward because I think there was a point where they weren't real sure when Kyle Tucker was coming back.
Right.
And I know they didn't say that. It was always going to be, well, it's going to be a matter of time. But I think you look at the moves they made, and there was some real concern about trying to find somebody internal to the organization who could fill that gap. And then realizing they didn't have that, and going out and finding those guys who had then DFA were available after the trade deadline. We should have won that game without Jason Hayward yesterday, but we wouldn't have won that game without Jason Hayward because he was the guy who was hitting yesterday. And I know that's, easy to say when you have a 5-run lead for most of the game, but Hayward is a veteran presence. He's a great defensive player, and they saw some things. I think Brian even alluded to this when the pickup was made with his ZiPS projection for the rest of the year, that he had a little bit of gas left in the tank and just maybe wasn't a fit for what the Dodgers needed at that moment, but certainly has been a fit for what the Astros have needed out of him. And I think that when you go into the playoffs, having guys at the end of your bench that are playoff experienced, playoff ready, and know how to win games, that's never a bad thing.
Yeah, I mean, it is that difference in a 1-run game, right? That where you've had a guy that's been up there before, you're going to have a calmer heartbeat. You're going to have a little bit steadier hand as opposed to the young guy going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Unless you have a young guy that's, Brian, too dumb to know the difference. And then there's always that, right?
And there's always a narrative, but I'll give you the numbers here. Astros pinch hitters this season, 104 plate appearances, 255 batting average, 308 on base, 468 slugging for 776 OPS. Here's the thing. That is 42% better than the league average pinch hitter.
Oh, so
it
is. Yeah. So
pinch hitters usually aren't that good, right? Because,
right.
If you had Yordan Alvarez pinch hitting a lot, he'd do really well, but why would you limit him to one plate appearance, right? Same thing, right? So pinch hitters usually a little less quality here. Astros pinch hitters have been particularly good this season. And does Joe Espada get credit for that? Absolutely, sure.
Yeah, I mean, you have to, like Andy said, you have to have the guts to put him in there.
Yeah, and notably, he's pinch hitting more. I had some numbers on that in Substack this weekend. He's pinch hitting more than Dusty Baker did, despite the fact he doesn't have Maldi in the lineup.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah. And I get we can even go to that too, how nice it is to have a catching position that's producing so well. You need both those guys in the lineup. But one of the things I wanted to hit on real quick is the defense. We've all seen, particularly in this last month, where the defense has been a real liability, but this series in particular, it's like you started to see, it's almost like they smell the end of the season and all of a sudden the defense has just gotten better. Andy, any insight on that?
I think it's just a matter, and I think this is something we're going to have to get used to as long as Jeremy Pena is the shortstop. I'm going to pick on Jeremy Pena for a minute because there have been a lot of what I would consider bonehead plays about 2 weeks prior to this conversation. It's been better this week. It feels like there's going to be a week-long, maybe 2 week-long period where Jeremy Pena is just going to forget how to field the ball. He's going to forget how his footwork works, going to forget how to throw the ball, all that stuff. And then he gets over it and he's really, really good again. We had that, I think, at the end of August. We saw that last year, a very memorable series where we got swept by the Reds at home, where he gave them probably 2 of those 3 games. So I'm not worried. The Astros defense is not as good as it was in 2022, I think. This is anecdotal, and I'm sure Brian will correct me and tell me, no, it's much better, and you're an idiot. And that's fine. I'm good with that. But anecdotally, it's not as good. We've given up more runs based on a lack of ability to prevent those runs defensively, it feels like, this season than any before. But
yeah, especially because it's magnified because all the games so we've actually seen actual losses stem from Singleton not being able to field the ball or Pena throwing one away.
And I think that's where most of my consternation comes from, is not Bregman having a boneheaded play or Altuve's limited range, we don't have what I would consider a competent defensive first baseman, and that magnifies some things. I think a better first baseman would make Pena look better, would make Bregman look better, would make Altuve look better, and we just don't have that. We're going to ride with Singleton, or I guess Yainer Diaz, who appears to be not great shakes at first base, although he hasn't had a lot of opportunities. Maybe he's better with more opportunities. I don't know. But that's been the difference for me defensively. But I think, this is a veteran team, and I trust them to tighten it up when the games start mattering from a playoff perspective. I do think there's something to the dog days of August. I do think there is something to being tired and mentally not being 100% for every game. I trust this team and this franchise to be there once October starts.
Brian, what are your thoughts on the defense? And is Andy right? Is the defense has it been appreciably worse since last year, or even 2022? More importantly,
it is worse than 2022, but the 2022 defense was particularly good, which is a point I made both on this podcast and on my blog many times, and tried to let an emphasis there. And I wrote earlier this season about how the defense was bad when they slumped, and the team has gotten better, and so has the defense. Easiest defensive number to understand is defensive efficiency, the percentage of balls in play that are turned into outs. The Astros turned 70.8% of the balls in play into outs. That's fifth best in the majors. And again, when I wrote something on this back in May, and they were, I think, in the high teens or early 20s there. The defense slumped early, like so much of the rest of the team. With errors, they've committed 75 errors this season. That's 10. Usually that's, I think, a little more than they do in most seasons.
Right.
So there is some regression there, but it's not as bad as you think, in large part because, of course, you see every single error the Astros make and go like, how can they possibly do that? And the answer is because even major league players do that every once in a while. I think we had this discussion about Jeremy Pena in 2012, or in 2022, where, he had, like, as I think Andy said, he had like a 2-week stretch where he forgot to field and everyone turned on him, and, then they turned back, and,
you want to go above that here.
Yeah, this happens during the season, right? Is that you just, these go together in a couple games, and it may be, as Andy says, the dog days of August, and hard to sustain yourself in baseball, and it may just be he's going to commit some errors during the year, and they just happen to get clustered in a few games. I don't know. Well, Jeremy Pena is a good defensive shortstop. I trust him to catch the ball, particularly when we get to the playoffs.
Well, that's a lot of looking back. Now we're going to look forward. So the Astros have 13 games left. They have a marginally easier strength of schedule than the Mariners. They have a 4.5 game lead. They have, and if you haven't seen it, Brian posted like my favorite chart of all time because I don't have to do the math, but essentially the Astros are in really good shape where even if they have an under 500 stretch for this next 13 games, the Mariners are pretty much going to have to play perfect baseball. I only bring that up because I'm a little concerned about this Padres series. So what are your thoughts, first of all, just coming up on with the Padres as we roll into this series? Andy, starting with you, like, do you feel like overly concerned, or just it's going to be another one of those where they rise to the occasion kind of deals?
Again, anecdotally, the Astros play better against contending teams than they do against teams that aren't contending this year. It seems to me, especially in the last couple of months. The Padres are a great team. They score a good amount of runs. I think they've scored 26 more runs than the Astros have this year. The Padres did not have an April like the Astros have. And so, emotionally, it feels like the Padres are a little bit better team, maybe. Marginally, I think there's a 4-game difference between the two of them. The thing that encourages me about Houston is that we're playing well on the road again. We're scoring runs on the road. We always kind of scored runs on the road. We've moved up from being pretty bad to middle of the pack to now being top 3 in run differential in the American League, and I think we're top 6 in all of baseball. That's a giant change from earlier this year. We're scoring runs and we're preventing runs. That's the formula for winning baseball. I think we're at 94 right now after this weekend, plus 94. Anyway, the Padres are a good team. We're going to have to face Dylan Cease in one of these starts. He's had our number while he was with the White Sox, at least. It remains to be seen if that carries over to the left coast. So it's just kind of it should be a evenly matched series. I think it's good. I'm not worried about it necessarily because the math feels kind of inevitable to me. Yes, the Astros could lose the division. That is a thing that could happen, but the chances are so remote for that happening, especially knowing that we have 3 against Seattle at home, where Seattle historically does not play well. I think it's just a matter of time before we wrap this up. I see this week as being something that lays out where we go something like 5-2, and that brings Seattle in. Assuming Seattle loses a couple of games to the Yankees and maybe one to the Rangers, that brings Seattle in with basically we have 3 chances to eliminate them completely from the playoffs. And that's kind of I think things are going to roll out. So whether it's the Padres this week or the Yankees or Toronto, it doesn't really matter who the opponent is at this point. We just need to kind of stack 8 more wins somehow, just to tie, I guess 9 more wins to sink it. And that would require Seattle to go undefeated.
Mm-hmm.
Still wouldn't win it with 8 wins.
Yeah, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, the 8 wins we stack would be not including still getting swept by the Mariners. I'll give you the nut. I'll show you the nut of the chart I posted. If the Astros go 6-7, the Mariners would have to go 10-2 to tie them. Can they do that?
But the tie right now, they have the tiebreaker.
Yes. So the tie, yeah, and they'd literally definitely win the tiebreaker in that scenario, because if they go 10-2, they can't get swept by the Astros, which is the only way the Astros take the tiebreaker from the Mariners. Of course, if they sweep the Mariners, it really doesn't matter, right? That's 6 off the magic number of what is it, 8 or 9. So anyway, all of this to say is I am content with 1 win against the Padres, and obviously would be really happy with anything more than that. Part of that is because they swept the A's, they really again blunted the momentum the Mariners got from winning their last 3 against the Rangers. They didn't gain any ground. And the Mariners have a big problem, and they don't have a lot of days left to make up the Astros. And of course, they're playing an even harder opponent. They're playing the Yankees.
So you think that because the Yankees have been a bit schizophrenic this year, and I found myself paying more attention to it, mostly because we have friends that are Yankee fans but haven't gone to the game and stuff. But it does feel like it's a more schizophrenic team. But I think Judge is on, like you had said in our chat yesterday, Andy, that Judge is on kind of a heater, and he's chasing some form of history, and that guy tends to do well when that's what's happening.
Unless it's the playoffs, in which case.
Yeah. Well, you're not chasing history.
These are regular season games, so yes, I expect Judge to hit a lot.
Yeah.
Anyway, the point is the Yankees have the best record in the American League. Yeah.
And the Yankees are still playing for their division. They only lead Baltimore, I think, by 2 games. 2 or 3 games. So there's still there's still something for the Yankees to play for. So they're not walking in there coasting to the finish line. The Mariners are not a good team. They're a 500 team. That's what their record says they are. And on paper, the Yankees should beat them 2 out of 3 at least. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen, because the Yankees are playing really well right now. Juan Soto is a September, October type of player. Judge,
as we know,
because it's regular season, he's going to hit the ball. So I trust there's going to be a good shaving off the number over the course of these next 7 days.
How it had to have been just demoralizing, guys, to be Seattle and having to claw back and walk off the Rangers twice, only to gain exactly 0 games in the standings. It had to have been just a kick in the nuts.
I believe the Twins lost, so maybe they'll get in there with the 6th wild card and get the honor of playing, getting their ass kicked in Minute Maid Park in the playoffs. We've seen that movie before.
We've seen
how that goes.
Yeah.
We've seen how that goes. I guess then, when do you guys have I want to get your predictions on when the Astros clinch. I believe that the Astros will clinch with the first win they have against Seattle in that series. I think the Cleveland series won't matter, because I want to get for my next topic of, we need to quit talking about the 2 seed. It's not going to happen, and I'm not even sure we care. So, Brian,
I'll-
prediction and your thoughts on the 2 seed.
One, I will take the second win of that series. And secondly, not the Monday game, but the Tuesday game. And then for Cleveland, Cleveland is Cleveland's only a game behind the Yankees, so they may want that.
So the Yankees might be fighting for the 2 seed.
Yankees might be fighting for the 2 seed, and Cleveland's 4.5 games up on and it's the same spread between the Astros and Guardians as between the Astros and Mariners. So the same logic applies. The only way the Astros are in play for the 2 seeds is if the Guardians have a big, go into a big slump. So I kind of recommend paying attention to them with one eye, if that. Look up their score, but I'm seeing plenty of tweets of every single run that's scored in a Guardians game. Like, dudes. And it's mostly dudes. Dudes. Just, back off here.
And honestly too, like that to me considers is so low on my concern, particularly how April was, Andy. Like we're not talking about clinching it. Like we're actually going to win this division by a bigger margin than we won last year's. And we won last year's on the last day of the season, despite how April went. And I know it's because we've ended up in a pretty pedestrian division. I don't think the Astros should be caught up in that definition of pedestrian, because we've seen what the Astros have been doing since May 1st. But either way, I mean, I don't care so much about the placement in the wild card, only because whatever success you have there is kind of anecdotal at this point. We really don't know whether the bye helps or hurts.
Well, we've seen wild card teams win the World Series. We've been the victim of that at least once. We saw it last year. I unfortunately had to have a reminder when I was in Cooperstown this past week, because they have their little Rangers display, which they are actively taking down right now because they got to make room for the next one. It won't be the Rangers again, I can tell you that. As far as my prediction, I know I'm supposed to be the grumpy one on the show, but I think we win 2 against the Padres. I think we win 3 against the Angels, maybe 4 against the Angels. I also think the Mariners drop 4 games this next week, which means we'll be clinched by the time the Mariners get on the plane Sunday night.
That would be pretty sweet, because I will be at those games. Yeah, I will be.
Now, I also wouldn't mind. It would be a little bit more nerve-wracking if we happen to clinch on Wednesday the 25th, because I'll be in attendance.
Yeah, I was to say, I would actually like them to clinch the Monday night of that series, because Andy, I've now decided I'm going and I have an extra ticket, and then we can get our championship T-shirts and be wearing them at the game on Wednesday. That's what I'm looking for.
And all of those things are possibilities. But yeah, I think. I really do think the Astros are going to have a good week, and I think things are going to be pretty well decided by the time we record Monday morning. As far as the 2 seed, it doesn't matter. Again, and I know I just said it, but we have too much evidence that baseball is fluky. As we've all said, getting in the playoffs is the goal, and once that happens, it is somewhat of a crapshoot. And I mean, I like our chances with the way we've been playing basically since May 1st to have another run and continue a couple of streaks in there.
Brian, you said you look like you had wanted something to add something.
Astros versus Padres this week, World Series preview.
Whoa, that would be good, because I've been predicting that World Series for about 8 to 9 years. So
finally, we will get revenge on Kevin Brown.
I'm so there for that. You know what we got to do? We got to do an episode live from in front of Petco Park if that happens. Oh, yeah, that would be sweet. Yeah, so like you said, guys, we've got full week, 3 against the Padres, 4 against the Angels. Then the Mariners come into town, and that will be it for the home slate. We'll do plenty of retrospective on this season. Lots more baseball to look forward to. For Andy, for Brian, I'm Jim. Everybody have a great weekend. Go Astros.